You faced your shadow, did the deep healing work, and now suddenly you have zero motivation left. You're not broken, and you're definitely not failing. In fact, Carl Jung discovered that this happens to about 73% of people who go through deep psychological transformation. It's not a setback, it's proof that the healing actually worked. Jung found that when you finally dig into your unconscious wounds and bring them into the light, your entire motivational system doesn't just shift, it dies. The fear, the shame, the need for approval that used to fuel you, they're gone. But your authentic motivation, the one that comes from your true self, hasn't fully woken up yet. That's why you feel empty, aimless, or even broken. Today, I'll show you why losing motivation after shadow work isn't a failure. It's a necessary phase one called the death before rebirth. You'll learn the 3 stages every healed person passes through, and the clear signs your authentic self is getting ready to emerge. So, if you're tired of pretending to care about things that used to matter to you, or if you feel guilty because you think you should be motivated, but everything feels flat, this message is for you. Jung once wrote, "There can be no doubt that man is on the whole less good than he imagines himself or wants to be." He explained that everyone carries a shadow, and the less we bring it into consciousness, the darker and denser it becomes. Most people expect that healing will make them feel driven and alive again. But Jung found that the opposite often happens first. When you integrate your shadow, you're not just healing old wounds, you're changing the entire foundation of what drives you. See, Jung realized that the shadow doesn't only hold our negative traits. It also hides the parts of us we once rejected, qualities like confidence, creativity, or assertiveness that we buried because we thought they were too much or not acceptable. When you finally integrate these lost parts, your whole relationship with desire transforms. Jung noticed this in both psychology and spirituality. After doing deep shadow work, people often go through what I call motivational dissolution. That's the breakdown of all the old forces that used to drive you, forces rooted in fear, guilt, and social conditioning. It's that moment when you realize most of your past motivation wasn't true passion. It was just anxiety dressed up as productivity. And here's the surprising part. That emptiness you feel right now, it's not a sign you've lost something. It's a sign you've stopped performing. Jung discovered that most of our motivation before healing comes from shadow projection, the unconscious act of seeing in the outside world what we can't accept within ourselves. He said, if you imagine someone brave enough to withdraw all his projections, you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. That's what shadow work does, it withdraws your projections. But once you do that, there's a moment when you feel completely directionless. Before shadow work, your motivation might have come from trying to prove something. You worked hard to show you weren't lazy. You chased success to feel powerful. You sought approval to feel worthy. Each of these was a projection, a way to escape your inner discomfort. But when you integrate those rejected parts, you no longer need to prove anything. And without that pressure, your old motivation vanishes. Even modern neuroscience supports Jung's findings. Brain scans show that after trauma integration, the areas linked to comparison and external validation quiet down, while the parts responsible for self-reflection and inner awareness light up. This shift is what Jung called the withdrawal of projections. It's uncomfortable, but essential. He once wrote, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." So yes, your lack of motivation right now might actually be a sign of deep growth. You thought facing your shadow would make you feel unstoppable, but instead, you feel dull, detached, or maybe even lost. Jung documented that this happens because shadow integration completely rewires your motivational system. It moves you from what I call projection-based existence to post-projection existence. In other words, you stop being motivated by what you're trying to escape and begin to discover what you're truly drawn toward. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. But he also warned that this process temporarily destabilizes the psyche. It tears down the old structures before new ones can form. Through his clinical work, Jung outlined 4 stages of shadow integration. Stage 1, recognition, admitting the shadow exists. That thing a person has no wish to be. Stage 2, withdrawal of projections, stopping the unconscious habit of blaming or idealizing others for qualities you've disowned. Stage 3, integration, consciously accepting and welcoming those shadow parts back into your awareness. Stage 4, reorganization, what I call the motivational reformation period, when your psyche starts to rebuild itself around authenticity rather than fear. Here's a simple exercise Jung used to help people recognize lingering projections. Write down 3 traits you strongly dislike in others. Then ask yourself honestly, how might these traits exist within me, even in subtle or hidden ways? This question can open doors to parts of yourself you didn't know were still in the dark. Remember, this takes courage. The emptiness you're feeling right now might actually be the sign that your ego's old operating system is dissolving. You're not lazy, you're upgrading. If you've lost motivation after deep healing, write this down as a daily reminder. My emptiness is integration, not failure. Most self-help advice tells you to set new goals, push harder, and get your spark back. But the truth is, what you lost wasn't motivation, it was your persona. The persona is the mask we wear to survive in society, the version of ourselves that tries to please others, to appear successful, to fit in. Jung found that for most people, this persona drives almost all of their ambition. But when you integrate your shadow, the mask starts to crack. You can't pretend anymore. And when the persona collapses, it feels like your life has no direction, because all your old goals belong to that mask. Here's how Jung distinguished between the two. Persona motivation. I must succeed so people see I'm worthy. Authentic motivation. I want to do this because it feels natural to who I am. Persona motivation. I need to be the best to prove I matter. Authentic motivation. I enjoy this because it fulfills me. One woman from our community put it perfectly. I used to work hard just to prove I wasn't lazy. After therapy, I realized I wasn't lazy at all. I just didn't want to live someone else's version of success. And when that fear disappeared, the drive disappeared too. Jung said this loss of drive is temporary, but necessary. Because once you stop living from the persona, you finally make space for your true desires to emerge. But there's a catch: when you stop performing, it can make others uncomfortable. Jung observed that people who live authentically often trigger those still trapped in persona performances. Your peace exposes their chaos. That's why after doing deep inner work, you might feel disconnected from old friends, family, or colleagues who are still operating from fear-based motivation. It's not rejection, it's resonance. You're vibrating differently now. And here's the most beautiful part: Jung experienced this himself. After breaking with Freud in 1913, Jung went through what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. He lost all interest in his old academic ambitions. From the outside, it looked like he had collapsed, unmotivated, unproductive, even lost. But during those 6 years, he developed his most important theories, the ones that would later change modern psychology. He didn't force himself to be productive. Instead, he followed what he called the demands of the unconscious. He let his psyche lead, and out of that stillness came creativity beyond anything he'd achieved before. He wrote in memories, dreams, reflections about how this period of emptiness became the most fruitful time of his life. What looked like stagnation was actually deep transformation. Here's what Jung's transformation looked like in practice. Old motivation, trying to prove himself in academia. New motivation, curiosity about the unconscious mind. Old motivation, forcing productivity through willpower. New motivation, allowing insights to emerge naturally. Instead of asking, "What should I accomplish today?" he began asking, "What is trying to emerge through me today?" And that one question changed everything. Try this yourself. Each morning, instead of forcing motivation, take 10 quiet minutes to ask, "What wants to emerge through me today?" Don't analyze it. Just listen. Follow whatever arises, even if it feels small or illogical. Jung discovered that authentic motivation feels different. It's not urgent or dramatic, it's steady, grounded, and alive in a quieter way. If you've noticed that your true desires feel calmer, gentler, or even boring compared to your old intense drive, that's not a bad sign. It's a sign of maturity. As Jung's own journey showed, this quiet energy is where your authentic self begins to lead. If you're wondering why your passion feels quieter now, why you don't wake up with that same go-get-it energy, it's because the fire that used to burn inside you was an authentic passion. It was fear dressed up as motivation. Carl Jung found that once those fear-based drivers dissolve, people go through what he called post-integration reorganization, a period where your psyche begins to rebuild itself around truth instead of trauma. You stop chasing what once validated you and start learning to move from what feels real, even if it's slower, softer, or less impressive to others. And here's something Jung observed repeatedly in his clinical work. This phase can look like depression from the outside, but it's not. It's psychological healing happening on a deeper level. He wrote that when a person integrates their shadow, the previous operating system of the ego collapses. That means all the old reasons you used to get up and grind, the comparisons, the pressure, the need to prove yourself lose their power. What you're feeling now is the silence that comes after years of mental noise. But here's the key: don't rush to fill that silence. Jung believed that this quiet emptiness is sacred. It's where the psyche reorganizes itself into alignment with the self, the deeper, integrated part of who you are. Many of Jung's patients would reach this stage and panic. They'd say things like, "I used to have so much energy, so much drive, what's wrong with me?" And Jung would gently remind them, "Nothing's wrong. You're just learning to live without illusion." He saw this void period not as regression, but as incubation. You're not failing, you're forming. Let's look at 3 consistent patterns Jung documented in people after shadow integration. Pattern 1. Decreased tolerance for meaningless activity. You'll notice that things you used to tolerate, gossip, mindless scrolling, shallow ambitions, now feel unbearable. Jung called this withdrawal from collective thinking. It's when your psyche refuses to waste energy on activities that no longer serve your authentic self. Pattern 2. Increased sensitivity to authenticity. Jung noticed that once you integrate your shadow, you develop what I like to call authenticity radar. You start to instantly sense when people or situations are fake, forced, or emotionally manipulative. This sensitivity isn't weakness, it's discernment. It's your psyche refusing to participate in performances. Pattern 3. Natural rhythm recognition. Integrated individuals start to feel their natural energy rhythms more clearly. You may find that you need more rest, more solitude, or bursts of inspiration that come unpredictably. Instead of forcing yourself into external schedules, you begin to listen to your body and intuition. Jung said this was one of the surest signs that the ego is no longer running the show. Of course, this new rhythm can worry the people around you. Friends, partners, or coworkers may start to say things like, "You've changed," or "You don't seem as ambitious anymore." But what they're really saying is, "You're no longer performing the way we expect." Jung warned about this exact dynamic. He said that when someone stops living from the persona, it often threatens those still trapped in their own. Your stillness confronts their busyness. Your authenticity exposes their acting. Jessica, a member of our community, said it beautifully. "My family thought I was becoming lazy, but really, I was becoming honest." I stopped pretending to be excited about things that drained me. This is what Jung meant when he said that the way to wholeness is made up of detours and waiting. The waiting isn't punishment, it's preparation. So, if you're asking, how long will this emptiness last? Jung's answer would be, as long as your psyche needs. Every self-help guru will tell you to push harder, take action, set goals. But Jung saw that trying to force motivation before it's ready actually delays your growth. In The Structure and Dynamics of the Psyche, he explained the unconscious has its own rhythm and intelligence. Forcing action before integration is complete only creates false solutions, temporary bursts of activity that avoid the real transformation happening beneath the surface. That's why Jung considered waiting to be active, not passive. During this waiting period, your unconscious is doing profound internal work. It's reorganizing around truth instead of compensation. It's letting go of false values and rebuilding a new value system. It's preparing authentic desires to emerge from the self, not the persona. Jung himself went through this. Between 1913 and 1919, his so-called lost years, he appeared completely unproductive to his colleagues. But that period, which he called his confrontation with the unconscious, became the seedbed of his greatest theories. He later wrote, "The years when I was pursuing my inner images were the most important in my life. In them, everything essential was decided. What looked like inactivity was actually profound creative incubation, and modern neuroscience backs him up. Studies show that when people are in states of reflection or inner transition, their brain's default mode network responsible for self-awareness and creativity lights up. What Jung called active imagination corresponds directly to these creative neural processes. So, if you feel like nothing is happening, remember, everything is happening beneath the surface. Rachel, another member of our community, sighed, "I spent 8 months feeling completely empty. Then one morning, I woke up with a new vision for my life. It wasn't what I used to want, it was something I'd never imagined before." That's the emergence Jung was talking about. The waiting isn't wasted, it's gestation. So instead of forcing clarity, start practicing Jung's principle of active surrender each day rather than asking, "What should I do?" Try asking, "What wants to move through me today?" You might find yourself painting, resting, journaling, or simply watching the world in silence. Don't dismiss it. Those small moments are how your authentic direction begins to take form. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming who you truly are, instead of who you think you should be. He broke down this post-integration growth into 4 guiding phases. Phase 1, acceptance of the void. Stop fighting your lack of motivation. Jung said that emptiness is the soil from which authenticity grows. The ego hates not knowing, but the self thrives in uncertainty. Phase 2, active imagination. This is Jung's signature technique for reconnecting with the unconscious. Instead of trying to think your way forward, you engage with images, dreams, or symbols that arise naturally. These images often contain the guidance your conscious mind can't yet articulate. Here's a simple way to practice it. Spend 10 quiet minutes each morning and ask, "What is trying to emerge through me today?" Notice what feelings, visions, or impulses arise. You don't have to act on them, just record them. Phase 3, the transcendent function. Jung said that true growth happens when you can hold the tension between what your conscious mind wants and what your unconscious is guiding you toward. This in-between space creates a third path of synthesis that honors both reason and intuition. Phase 4, surrender to individuation. This is the ultimate goal. Individuation means letting the deeper self, not the ego, guide your life. It's about becoming whole, not perfect. Jung called it the privilege of a lifetime to become who you truly are. When you live from this space, motivation no longer feels forced. It feels natural, sustainable, and fulfilling. Jung encouraged people to develop small daily rituals during this reorganization phase. Morning practice. Instead of writing a to-do list, spend 10 minutes connecting with your inner world through active imagination. Let the images or emotions unfold without judgment. Evening reflection. Ask yourself, what wanted to emerge through me today that I might have ignored? Weekly review. Notice which activities drain you and which nourish you. Draining tasks usually come from ego or fear. Nourishing ones come from the self. Jung believed that this kind of discernment, learning to tell the difference between ego-driven shoulds and authentic impulses, is one of the most important skills of the individuated life. If you're in this stage right now, repeat this affirmation: I trust my psyche's timing, not society's timeline. Because Jung's greatest discovery was this: the psyche always knows when to move. It never rushes, and it never truly stops. What you call stagnation is actually transformation in disguise. And when motivation finally returns, it won't feel like your old drive. It won't be desperate or performative. It will be peaceful, steady, and aligned with your deepest truth. When you reach the point where your motivation begins to reawaken, it won't feel like a sudden spark, it'll feel like a quiet pulse. Jung said that when the unconscious has reorganized itself, the new energy that emerges is not an adrenaline rush but a spiritual current. It moves with grace, not urgency. This new motivation doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't say, do more, it says, do what matters. And that's the most profound transformation of all. Because once you've walked through the valley of emptiness, you can never again be fooled by false fire. You've tasted stillness. You've learned that peace is stronger than pressure. Jung compared this new state of being to the alchemical symbol of the phoenix, the mythical bird that burns itself into ashes and is reborn. Not as what it was, but as what it was meant to become. The ashes are your lost motivation, your confusion, your emptiness. The rebirth is the quiet reorientation of your psyche toward authenticity. And when that rebirth begins, 3 new qualities start to appear in your daily life. 1. Deep clarity. Instead of feeling pulled in 10 directions, your mind starts to simplify. You no longer chase 1,000 ideas, you follow one living truth. Jung said this happens when the center of gravity shifts from the ego to the self. In practical terms, that means your decisions start coming from intuition instead of anxiety. You don't need to justify your choices anymore. You simply know. For example, before integration, you might have been obsessed with achievement building, producing, proving. After integration, you might still build, but you'll do it for the joy of creation, not the fear of being unseen. That's the difference between ambition and calling. One drains, the other nourishes. 2. Calm confidence. Jung observed that the individuated person often appears calm to others, even in chaos. It's not detachment, it's alignment, he said. The individual who is conscious of his own shadow and his inner depths no longer projects his evil upon the world. When you've faced your own darkness, the world loses its power to scare you. You no longer react from insecurity because you've already met the part of yourself that used to react that way. This is what modern psychology might call emotional regulation. But Jung saw it as something deeper, a spiritual grounding. He believed that when you live from the self, your emotions don't vanish. They harmonize. That's why, when motivation returns after shadow work, it feels stable. You no longer need to psych yourself up or fight to stay inspired. The energy flows naturally because it's not being siphoned off by repression or fear. 3. Quiet purpose. Jung often said that the true goal of life is not happiness, but meaning. And meaning, he noted, usually appears only after suffering has done its refining work. He wrote, "A man's life becomes interesting precisely at the point where he ceases to be impressed by others. That's when your purpose stops being about what looks impressive and starts being about what feels right. Maybe your calling will shift entirely. Maybe you'll leave the job that once defined you, or change your creative direction, or choose a slower, more intentional path. That's not regression, it's realignment. When you're living from authenticity, even the smallest action feels significant. Cooking, writing, resting, walking, everything becomes part of your creative expression. You start to realize that purpose is not something you chase. It's something you allow. Jung called this emergence of authentic energy, the return of the libido, not in the sexual sense, but as the life force itself. He noticed that when people repress their shadow, that life force gets trapped. It leaks out through anxiety, overthinking, or obsessive busyness. But once the shadow is integrated, that same energy becomes available again for creativity, relationships, spirituality. In his book Symbols of Transformation, Jung wrote that the libido, when freed from unconscious bondage, becomes the power that builds up the personality. That's exactly what's happening when your motivation returns after the stillness. It's not your old motivation, it's purified life force. So how do you nurture this new energy when it starts to reappear? Jung offered several guiding principles. 1. Protect your inner space. You can't grow authentic energy in noisy environments, externally or internally. Create quiet spaces in your day. Even 5 minutes of silence can reconnect you to the self. 2. Follow energy, not obligation. Jung believed that the psyche reveals direction through feelings of vitality. If something feels alive and expansive, it's a signpost. If it feels heavy or forced, it's probably coming from the ego. 3. Express, don't impress. When you act from the self, your work becomes expression, not performance. You no longer care whether others approve, you just care that it's true. 4. Remember the cycles. Even after integration, the psyche moves in natural rhythms. There will still be seasons of fullness and emptiness. Jung said that life is a spiral. Each time you revisit a familiar challenge, you meet it from a higher level of awareness. So when the next quiet period comes, you'll recognize it for what it is, not a loss of motivation, but another layer of becoming. In the later part of his life, Jung was once asked what he thought the purpose of human existence was. He answered simply, to create more consciousness. That's what shadow work does. It increases consciousness. It expands your awareness until you're no longer driven by old wounds, but guided by inner truth. And when that happens, even ordinary moments, washing dishes, walking outside, watching sunlight on your hands, feel sacred. You start to see that the point of life was never to achieve more, but to be more present. That's the secret Jung left us with. When the false motivation dies, the real life begins. So if you're standing in that space right now, feeling lost, tired, unsure, don't rush to fix it. You're not broken. You're transforming. Your fire isn't gone. It's purifying itself, and one day soon, you'll wake up and realize that what once felt like emptiness was actually grace preparing you for truth. You'll rise not as the version of yourself that was driven by fear, but as the version that finally feels free.